Hello, everyone. This is Eva Nolik-Smith with YogaUOnline. And I'm very pleased to be here today with author Dorothy Holtermann, a nutritional health coach and author of the best-selling book, Love Food That Loves You Back. And Dorothy is also the creator of the Eat for Your Genes protocol, which is one of the things we'll be talking about in this free download talk. Dorothy's background includes extensive studies with some of the world's top health and wellness experts, including Dr. Andrew Weil, Dr. Deepak Chopra, and Dr. David Katz, who is director of Yale University's Prevention Research Center, and many, many more. And what really caught our interest with Dorothy is that she's at the forefront of cutting-edge knowledge on how to apply recent findings into the factors that affect gene expression. So most of us have heard that it's possible to modulate gene expression in such a way that even if we have genetic weaknesses, they're not necessarily expressed. And one of Dorothy's many great expertises is in this topic of gene expression and how we can modulate it with our yoga practice, with the food we eat, to help reduce the risk that our inherent genetic weaknesses don't turn up down the road into some kind of chronic disease that we are susceptible to, genetically speaking. So welcome, Dorothy. So glad to have you join us.
Thank you, Eva. It's delightful to be here and share some of the work that I've been doing with your community.
Yeah, I have gotten a chance to get to know you a little bit personally, and you are a very delightful person with a surprising broad knowledge into this whole area of genes and genetic expression. But I'm curious, what is your background? How did you get into this area?
Well, for many years, I had a daughter that I was raising in Lower Manhattan. I was not in health and wellness. I was an attorney. And that daughter just had chronic disease, and I could not get a diagnosis. And for years, I wound up studying first with other people and then directly myself. We called it alternative medicine. Now I call it complementary medicine. But there was really nothing that the doctors could do to help her. Constant coughing, mood swings. She just never seemed robustly well. So, we were able to get her acupuncture and acupressure, and I made many, many experiments with food. So I was able to figure out her ideal diet. And it wasn't until she was 10 years old that we did get a diagnosis, and it was a very upsetting diagnosis. It was a diagnosis of cystic fibrosis, which is a gene disorder. And that turned my attention to following the Human Genome Project, which was busy mapping out human genes, hoping that I would get better information. But the interesting thing was when Jessie was diagnosed, we went to the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation and we got their recommended lifestyle and diet. And because I'd already been working with her for so many years, I realized that it was absolutely not correct for her.
No.
And in fact, because it's a disorder that children have a tendency to lose weight, not process fat, they recommended a high-fat processed food diet, like milkshakes and Burger Kings, all of which I had learned from experience was really not good for her. But I did understand that she would probably have to be on antibiotics from time to time. So I changed her diet so that none of the food that she ate had any antibiotics. So we started to eat wild meat, venison. We were lucky we lived in Manhattan. We could easily go to Balducci's and get all of this, buffalo. We ate ostrich. We ate everything that, was not produced in farms. And we found yoga. And I, not until she was in her early teens, but we started to go to integral yoga together. And I
Really?
noticed a really big difference in her health when we did yoga. So I unfortunately didn't take as good care of myself as I took care of her, and winded up, because we were in 9/11, we were quite a few different catastrophes, because we moved to Florida, then we were in like Hurricane Katrina. It was like just
Oh
a
no.
bad series that really my own health really degraded. When I healed myself, that's when I realized I had to make a career shift. And I shifted into nutrition, but I was one of the early pioneers of nutrigenomics, because in the beginning, it was really a disappointment when we got the human genome reports, because they mapped out the whole human genome. But really, we found out that the epigenome, what sits above the genes and is influenced by our environment and our food, seemed more powerful. But having a child with cystic fibrosis, I knew no matter how I influenced her with epigenomics, her genes were still having a big impact in her overall health. And when we were able to address them directly with more information, we got another whole level of health, to the point where she's 35. She moved to LA, and they didn't even believe that she had cystic fibrosis. They redid her testing. So that is so exciting for me to share with people, that you could be dealt as serious a deck of, gene cards as my daughter Jessie, and still, by using the combination of epigenetics and genetics together, get an astonishing better health outcome than you could if you just did one or the other.
That is so cool. So tell us, epigenetics is the science of how genes get expressed and how some genes get expressed and not others, and what causes the difference?
Well, that's how we think of it, but it's actually a little bit more complicated. We're actually finding within the human genome literally locations. So like the epigenome was as built in as the genome. So I don't even think of them as that separate anymore, because your environment, good, bad, and different, is constantly modulating your gene expression. And then the body has all of these like system overlays. So while one gene may be a problem, it's extraordinary how it has all of these other ways to compensate besides a direct impact on the gene. So, this is like in its infancy, but we have some of these genes that I'm working with. One that I want to share the information about today, which is the compt gene, COMT. We now have some really good research. So now we have a really easy way to discover if people have the gene. That was a big breakthrough, because when we first got the mapping, only people like Oprah, who could pay $15,000, could find out like what her genome is.
Right.
And now we have access to a little treasure most people don't even know, but 23andMe and Ancestry.com for like $100. Ancestry, when it's on sale, like $59. You can get, you don't realize it because they give you, Ancestry. But within those reports is a raw DNA file.
Right.
And that's what I use and other people use. You can get that raw DNA file, download it, it will not change. And now there's other ways, other interpretations, because 23andMe and Ancestry.com do not do very good jobs in giving you any kind of health information that's, in my opinion, useful.
Right.
And then I have had a poor experience with, I did join a medical group that were going to take the raw DNA and help with, allopathic medicine. And I was so excited because I've been looking for this partnership for a long time, and they downloaded my DNA, and one of the recommendations, because I have a tendency to have overweight, I know what the genetic SNP was, and the recommendation was that I go on some kind of a diet suppressing pill, allopathic pill. When I said, well, what receptors does that use? And they say,
Right.
oh, it uses serotonin receptors. And I was like, this is where you worry. Like, you can get science and you can use it for good, or you could get science and go back into that mindset where they're going to like fix the human body instead of support the human
supporting
body.
it. Yeah, yeah. So the compt gene, is that what's known as a genetic SNP?
So we have all these genes, and each of the genes has basically a coding that looks like an alphabet. And a variant, which we used to call mutations, but we're trying to call them variant now, so people don't feel like they're mutants, because we all have variants that are different than, say, what most people have. So the compt gene creates an enzyme, a compt enzyme, and that enzyme degrades neurotransmitters. So it basically detoxifies neurotransmitters.
Interesting.
And we call it the wild type, is what most people have. What most people have is you'll have, where this is really impactful for this conversation, there's other things that it does, but for this conversation, I just want to share, it really dramatically increases the amount of dopamine in your brain. And it dramatically increases how long dopamine stays in your brain. So a person with the wild kind, they'll have a situation that they'll feel stress. Dopamine will be released and pretty much quickly leave the brain. A person with the variant, now we all have two copies of genes. So you get one from your mother, one from your father. So if you have one copy of the variant, dopamine will stay in your brain 2 times longer. If you have both a copy from your mother and father of the variant, dopamine will stay in your brain 4 times longer, which is really is clinically significant. And even though this is a rare, I wouldn't say rare, but it is particularly noticeable in Caucasians from European ancestry. As many as 20 to 30% of the population have that homozygous 2 copies of the gene. And
so what does that mean if dopamine stays longer in your brain?
So there are good and bad things. The good is that we call those people strategists. You know, in their good way, they have a lot of dopamine. They're really able to concentrate for long periods of time. They don't get distracted. They're really good in mapping out strategies. They're really, I think from an evolutionary point of view, they're really good at noticing problems and solving them quick. So that's why they became very valuable. However, when you live in an environment that there is a lot of triggers and a lot of things to notice that are problematic, this constant barrage of dopamine then becomes too much. And it starts constantly triggering the vagus nerve, which controls our nervous system, and switches back and forth our autonomic nervous system, which is the part of our nervous system that we don't control. But by this constant triggering of stress, we move into the part of the nervous system, which is the sympathetic nervous system, which is the fight and flight. And we trigger it too often, fight and flight, fight and flight. Then the person winds up getting inflammation, systemic inflammation, that has the irony of making them foggy brained. So they go from razor sharp to, when it gets too much, foggy brained and can't even, let go.
Right.
So they go, it used to be very simple. They would call the people who have the wild card warriors, because they are great to go to battle. They're, stress comes in, goes out. function. The problem with the wild card is that they need a lot of direction. They don't self-direct really well. Dopamine goes in and out. They have little problems with being attention deficit. So that's the one extreme. The good and bad. Good is that you could take a lot of stress. Bad is without stress, you kind of get lost and bored. And I guess those are the people who like roller coaster rides and skydiving.
Yeah.
Things a person on the other end of the spectrum wouldn't even think of subjecting themselves to. There's way too much dopamine going on.
Yeah.
So in the good version, so that in the version of the of having the too much dopamine, those people can be called worriers. So it's like warriors. But I like to break down into three groups. That you have, people who are warriors, people who have one copy, which I find a lot of my clients do. They have just one copy. So dopamine just stays in their brain just a little bit more. I am blessed with that version. I like that version because it's sort of the best of both worlds. You can cope with stress a little bit extra, but you could also self-regulate for a really long period of time. I call those people balanced. And I don't like to call the other people warriors because I don't want to plant that into their brain that already worries too much. I like to make it more positive, that you're really good at strategy.
Right. Yes.
But I do tell them whenever I see, usually I could tell from just the first interview, but when I get a verification from their gene report, I usually, say to them, okay, so yoga and mindfulness is wonderful for everyone. However, for you, it is mandatory. Period.
That's great. So conversely, I guess we can maybe speculate that a lot of people who are regular yoga practitioners have the
I suspect. I see a lot of them. So
yeah, interesting.
But there's also lots that they can do with their diet. So it's really interesting that people who have the wild kind, do very well with a very high protein, animal-rich food diet. So your Burger King types, your meat and potato types, because tyrosine converts it to dopamine, and they need a good flow of constant precursors to dopamine. Whereas the maybe yoga types on the other end of the spectrum, they don't want a whole lot of protein from animal foods, hence all the vegetarians.
And why would they not want a lot of animal protein?
Because there's a lot of the precursor to dopamine, tyrosine, becomes L-dopa, then becomes dopamine. So if they're eating a lot of protein, they're producing a lot, they're more readily producing, they have the precursors really available for a lot of dopamine.
I see,
But it's interesting, so the balance type can get to sort of choose how they want to feel, okay, I want to be more chill, I'm going to move more towards the, vegetable grain spectrum, oh, I have a big meeting or a big talk tonight, I'm going to have like extra protein.
Interesting, yeah. So how do we regulate the compt gene? It sounds like that's one of the big buggers that you really want to get familiar with. And
it is one of the buggers you want to get familiar with.
And I should also say how many people you mentioned, as many as 20-30% of
Caucasians from European ancestry.
I see.
It's pretty rare to have but either end of the spectrum, it's good to know where you fall. Because there's so many people who get attention deficit, knowing like that you can change the level of dopamine in your brain without jumping off a cliff or, engaging in even, in addictions. There's healthier ways for you to modulate that.
Yes. So that gives
learning yoga, so there's many types of yoga, and that's why there's many types of yoga. some yoga is very vigorous, and people like to sort of push themselves in that
Right.
direction, and others know, well, yeah, maybe I could do that a couple of days a week, but now you have to do, I have to make sure I also get yoga nidra, I have to do more gentle yoga,
Introspective kind. Right,
yes.
right. Yeah.
So
Yeah.
and then I have some favorite ways, particularly so with the vagus nerve. It's easy to think, oh, parasympathetic nervous system good, sympathetic nervous system bad, and it's not about that. It's about how you can regulate and be resilient and go back and forth in a useful way, so you don't have a body, because too little, if you're in your parasympathetic nervous system too often, you actually become very dull. It's actually a very primitive state, that you don't do a lot of creation, and that's not a good thing either. So I like to teach my students a lot of different breathing and other techniques, but also I think Kundalini yoga is particularly good at regulating that vagus nerve. But the truth be told, yoga in and of itself is extraordinary.
And the
At,
vagus nerve is important because it regulates the
vagus nerve,
dopamine.
which is the longest nerve in your body that starts at the base of your head and then goes down into your digestive system, has this ongoing communication with your body. So when we talk about the compt, adding dopamine, dysregulating the vagus nerve to be pushing us too often into the fight and flight part of our autonomic nervous system, we're also doing terrible things to our gut, our digestion, our organs, our immune system. It cascades out into a lot of problems. So having the ability to go back and forth, you want to be able to run for the bus, but then you want to be able to sit in the bus in a few minutes, we return to listening to your podcast. You don't want to be upset for 20 minutes. So. But you don't want to be, oh, there's my bus. I probably won't be able to make it. The heck with it. You want to run for your bus.
Well, Dorothy, this is just so interesting, and I think I could stay talking with you all day long, but I know you are a busy girl, and we're also really super excited because you have a course coming up on how we can work with the compt gene more consciously, and various ways to indicate whether or not we have it.
I have a little, it's wonderful to verify it, but I have a little quiz that is helpful for people to identify.
Great. Yeah, so tell us about the course and what you'll be covering.
So I'm gonna explain a little bit more about why knowing your genes, your genome type is important. So we did touch a bit about earlier, but I want to go into a little bit more depth so people understand, and they understand how they can get access to their raw DNA file, and why that might be important to them. But I want to go a little bit deeper into the compt gene itself, and really have people understand how this excess neurotransmitters translate into their nervous system, and how the nervous system can get locked down, and how that they're really simple movements, everything from eye movements to breath to yoga poses that you can sort of have in your toolbox, and food strategies quickly to change that.
Yeah, that's so cool, because it takes stress management to another level. We're all sort of familiar with the importance of managing stress and all of that, but I think what you're pointing out is that we all respond very differently to stress, and you have to know, where you fall on that trajectory.
Yeah, and you know what? It changes your stories you make up about yourself. So now, instead of people saying, oh, I'm attention deficit, they go, oh, neurotransmitters don't stay in my brain fast. So I'm going to go do some vigorous activity, or I'm going to have a nice big protein so I get more,
Right.
dopamine. Like, in other words, it's not about them as a bad person or a good it's just about something that they have control over.
Right. Or conversely, I need to go do a dopamine dump.
Or on the other end, when I find that my comp people on the other end start to say, I'm a difficult person, I pick on people, I'm too picky. And when they realize, no, I just have a lot of neurotransmitters going on, I just need to stop, meditate a little bit, and they'll calm down and I'll be back to myself. It's very empowering. I find that in all of nutrigenomics, it's the compliance, when people understand what's going on, is so much better, because you don't feel like they're guessing.
Yeah. It's such a wonderful sense of empowerment, because the way we've been raised is, genes, you got dirty genes,
they're scary. Well, actually, they're
Yeah.
your best friends. You can modulate them.
Yeah, that's so cool. That's so cool. Well, before we close, can you give us one simple example of
Sure.
something that might help us regulate
I have the simplest
vagus nerve?
one.
All right.
Okay, so you could use a breath, which is the same as like just breathing out your mouth, like, you're going to close your mouth, and at the same time, you're going to smile. So it's like this. And you've just activated your vagus nerve.
It's very blissful. I don't know if it was watching you doing it or
no, it's really powerful, because you just use the breath, which is, but you close your mouth as if you're doing that. So, and breathe out your nose. So while you just gently Mona Lisa smile.
Ah, so cute. Yeah.
And then you activate the base of your vagus nerve to relax a little bit. And it's contagious, just like exactly what you said. I don't know whether it's from watching you, but also we co-regulate others when we do that with our smile.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good thing.
Yeah, that's so great. Well, thanks so much for making this really complex topic of the genome and the epigenome and the gene modulation into kind of similar experiences, listening to a nice good night story.
Good.
I applaud your great skills as a teacher. So Dorothy, thank you so much for joining us, and we're really very much looking forward to your course. And we're also, I should say, preparing a really nice practice on vagus nerve regulation, a yoga practice that goes with the course. So that will be super interesting for everyone. So, all right. Thanks for joining us, everyone. And we'll see you at your next course on YogaUOnline. Take care. Bye-bye.